Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Holger Berg. I am with Wuppertal Institute and the Surpass project. I'll be moderating the next panel. With me are Kamila Kocia from Atma.io by Avery Dennison, a global materials and digital identification solutions company. And Kamila, you've been very much involved with the study presented by Min, and you will speak a bit about recommendations around the topic of SMEs. Then there is Anna-Lena Hoffmann. Anna-Lena, you're a compliance lawyer with CONTIQ lawyers in Stuttgart, and you are a member of the Product Information 4.0 project, in which you have analyzed information gaps and the technical setup of a product information system from a legal perspective. And last not least, there is Andres Alcayaga, senior researcher at Wuppertal Institute, doing his research on the intersection of circular economy, digital technologies, and business models. And Andres has been very active in the Surpass project, working on developing recommendations for policymakers, businesses, and IT companies. So within this panel, we want to talk about recommendations and suggestions to make the DPP work. We will start by small introductions on the findings of each of you, and we will start off with Andres on recommendations from the side of the Surpass project.
Hello, my name is Andres Alcayaga. As Holger said, I am working at the Wuppertal Institute, and today I will offer you some recommendations for policymakers and businesses that we gathered in the last months as part of the CIRPASS project. We did several surveys with CIRPASS partners and external stakeholders. We had around 100 people involved in the different surveys that we used to gather all these different recommendations. As you can see here, I have first a list of recommendations for policy. This is a very high-level overview of the results of the surveys. First of all, it's important to prioritize the principles of DPP, so transparency, sustainability, and circularity. We need to be able to use the data to measure the circular economy, for example, using KPIs or compliance reporting based on DPP data. We also need a resource-efficient infrastructure, so we need to know what to do with the data carriers at end of life. And of course, we need real-life applications. So companies and economic actors need to have new products and circular business models in order to use the DPP data. Second, and this has been mentioned today, we need to generate a level playing field. We need incentives for circular business practices based on DPP data, in special for SMEs, as was mentioned several times today. Also fines, and we need to standardize terminology. For example, not only terminology in terms of technical aspects, but also business aspects. So what is the meaning of traceability? What is the meaning of different stakeholders? What are their roles? And so we need to go beyond the technical aspects of the DPP. And of course, policy coherence. So we need to avoid the application of efforts by different stakeholders. In terms of knowledge, as you can see in the last box, we need information campaigns and guidelines with best practices, training and educational programs, not only for the workforce, but also for SMEs, universities. And perhaps a good idea would be to implement support centers at the regional level to help companies with implementation. And for all this, of course, we need funding, we need money. So we need to fund the future. We need more research projects and pilot projects. We need to also fund technological developments, open source solutions, and new technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain. And another idea is that to use, of course, after 2027, when we have road passports in place, we can use green public procurement to stimulate or drive the demand of products with active road passports. And finally, in terms of policy, we need to ensure stakeholder alignment and participation. So it's important that we have time-like clarity. Many of these questions came today in the slide, of people asking, okay, when is this happening? Is it 27, 29, 25? So it's very important for people and for economic actors to get this clarity and to be able to do gradual rollouts of the road passports. In addition, after 27, we need to have a sort of implementation, assessment, and feedback, so we can make corrections to current systems, also perhaps to policy. And policymakers is also very important that policymakers kind of stimulate sectoral alliances or ecosystem. So for example, with public-private partnerships. And finally, it's very important to look at international initiatives. So what are other countries and other regions doing in terms of road passports? For business and IT, I think the key word is opportunities. So I think companies need to try to see the road passports as an opportunity to develop sustainable and circular business models. And they need to develop interoperable solutions, for example, thinking about a single framework that works for several product categories and perhaps even for different types of products. And they need to develop a strategy that is consistent with the data stored in the product passport. And of course, engage with the different stakeholders of the value chain, customer, users, and supply chain management. Here to finalize, I think a key word is, as I wrote there, ecosystem leadership. I think companies need to think about how they can manage and grasp all the opportunities that the information on the product passports is stored, and how they can use this information and make it like a good business opportunity for them as well. So now I give the floor to my colleague Kamila.
Yes, thank you, Andres. I hope everybody can hear me. So we wanted to actually focus a little bit and maybe go down more a little bit to the level of an SME, because Andreas focused more on the policymakers and let's say the business as such. Obviously, an SME is very important, plays a very important role, especially as Andreas mentioned before. We have 98% of the companies in the textile business who are SMEs. The study that Min was mentioning as well was concluded, and we wanted to show some common, let's say, statements, which you already have seen in other recommendations, in the conclusions that other colleagues presented. So what the recommendations would be for the SMEs is a couple of main messages. I think that the first one is really the collaboration and alignment in a very broad statement of that. So not only the collaboration on the EU member states and the clarity on the DPP requirements, but also the facilitation of collaboration within the ecosystems, with the sorters, with recyclers, with manufacturers, between brands, between solution providers. So it's a little bit of a broad statement for that particular problem, but it is very important to actually guide the way for the SMEs by showing them how our joint successes can be shared, how the business models introduced can be shared, and how it can be actually implemented at the SME level. The other message that we wanted to share is the awareness and knowledge building, which is very important. We have faced a challenge of actually getting access to the SMEs. So it means that they are not as widely represented within the groups that we are approaching. So we are seeing that it's still a huge challenge to actually be able to get to the SME, understand their challenges. We have a common group that's actually normally showing up, but we would like to hear more voices and to hear more SMEs from different sectors and different industries. Also, what would really help, and I think Andres also mentioned that, is a help desk for the per member state, so that the SMEs can also approach it within their native languages, that they can actually ask questions, what is DPP, and get some clarity on the legislation, but also on what the next steps could potentially be. And then, of course, creating training, sharing successful implementation models. I think it's also very crucial to the success for the SMEs. Another steps, so the infrastructure. So obviously, as Andreas mentioned before, they don't have a lot of money to actually spend on the pilots, innovation, which actually is very common across bigger businesses. So it is important to actually take them on board within the test cases, pilots. Nothing is going to happen without the funding, but I think that was made very clear in the previous slide. So we are hoping for more funding opportunities to actually support the DPP implementations, not only for the bigger businesses, but also in regards to the SMEs. And also as well the facilitation of the DPP as a service offering. So you have seen a visual implementation, let's say, of a DPP as a service, which is based on assumptions as we have of today. We don't know if that will be compliant. We hope so. I expect some changes, but it would be great to actually be able to define what DPP as a service offering should be. And then last but not least, standardization and the adoption. So the adoption of and the driving of standardization, acceptance of standards by solution providers, software providers, and also establishing the common understanding of standards. I think that were the main messages after the interviews that we have concluded and the main call-outs from the SMEs that we wanted to represent here. And with that, Anna, please.
Thank you very much. I think this will be a little bit different because I'm talking more about a legal topic. From the product information 4.0 project team, we were analyzing, as you heard, information gaps, but also we looked at a framework for a product information system and then looked at it from a legal perspective. Oh, this is there. And this may look a bit overwhelming. Look at the circles first. So if we group the data, I named one of them environmental data, and on the left you can kind of see the European legislation that we looked at for potential information gaps or usage barriers and so on. Except ESPR, which is very, very new, but below. And there might be more, of course, under environmental data, but this is basically everything that we talked about right now. But you can also group this data a bit differently, and these circles, they overlap, so they're not all singular. Environmental data could potentially be personal data, it will be mostly non-personal data, and so on. But I think it is important to understand that in terms of our European data market and the digitalization, that we need to look at and group data differently to also kind of see what kind of legal framework we're actually moving in. So personal data, as most of you probably know, is governed strongly by the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, maybe also by the e-Privacy Directive and potentially in the future regulation. But non-personal data is governed under the free flow of non-personal data regulation, for example, and non-personal data can also be machine-generated data, and this might fall under potentially the Artificial Intelligence Act, which will come soon, or the Data Act, which just came into force, which basically governs IoT data. And all of this may potentially also be grouped into trade secrets or intellectual property, which is also governed by a legislative framework. So I think it will be interesting to look at it from, to look at the data that can be collected under the DPP for different legal frameworks as well. And I brought two examples from the legal side. One of them that came up a lot is the example of RFID as a data carrier and the topic of data protection. And the project team came to the conclusion that there's not one perfect data carrier. Of course not, there's many, but especially the textile sector often uses RFIDs, RFID tags. They can be sewn into clothes. They could be a button and so on. However, it's important to know that if I can track a person or I potentially identify a person, and then that doesn't mean identify by name or the address. It can be identified by a unique identifier. GDPR may apply to this data. So using RFID in textiles or electronics or wherever in DPPs can also mean that we come into the scope of the GDPR, and then this has to be addressed. So as a consequence, it's really important to look at what kind of legal framework I fall under. And the second example is our arguments that came a lot when we were talking to stakeholders. Recyclers, for example, especially would profit greatly from more information about products or textiles in order to do their job even better than they're doing right now. But some stakeholders said that they are not willing, or they would like to not provide more information because it falls under confidential business information or it's trade secrets. So this kind of has to be solved. And the question is, can we mandate by law more information? And this argument, it has to be assessed case by case, product by product. It can't really be solved globally, I think. For example, we also found that stakeholders in the electronics sector had a higher need for trade secret protection than those in the textile sector. But even there, there's some hesitation. But I think this cannot stop. This argument, bringing it too broadly or too globally, cannot and will not stop the functioning of the DPP. Thank you.
So, it's all yours. So, Anna-Lena, from a lawyer's perspective and the legal perspective that you've just shown us, what are the most important things to take into regard right now?
Well, right now, I think. Right now, I think. Oh, thank you. I think it's very important to look at the data that there is and the data that may come. And normally, from a lawyer's perspective, I would say talk to your data people. Big companies, of course, have data teams, at least a data person, data management teams, and so on. But we also just saw that textile sector, for example, has many really smart companies, and they usually don't have data teams. And nonetheless, it is very important to not ignore that this is coming and to look at their data. I think there can be great profits from it in any case, but this is very important to group data, maybe speak to a lawyer or to colleagues to get informed about what is to come and how to deal with the data. Look at the legal framework. I think that's very important. And as soon as
So are there specific regulatory insecurities or concerns that you are concerned by right now?
I want to make one example here for regulatory insecurity, and this is also with regard to RFID tags in clothes. At the moment, this falls under the WEEE, the Waste, Electric and Electronic Equipment Directive, and then transposed into member states' law. It can happen that under member states' law, that potentially a textile that has an RFID tag in it becomes electric or electronic equipment. And as a consequence, the consumer who owns the item and wants to recycle it has to remove the RFID tag and recycle it differently from the garment, which is not the purpose of recycling, because the recycler wants the information that comes out of the RFID tag. And so, this is an insecurity that currently exists, and something like this should be addressed. I think that would be very helpful for all the stakeholders.
Thank you. Kamila, looking at the SME study, what is the most important recommendation that you would take out of that one?
I think, from our recommendations, it's actually a knowledge building. So I would be very happy to hear that a lot of SMEs are listening to our presentation today, and they will be contacting service providers, and they will be contacting CIRPASS for more information. That would be actually a very good start to implementation and the successful DPP introduction, I would say. And then, I would suggest, starting to show some more interest into the digital triggers, the data carriers, service providers, what's out there, what's happening, what are the new market trends. So I think that would be the first step to actually take towards the successful pilots and implementation.
Thanks. And Andres, so from all the surveys and the research that has happened so far, is there one or two things that build like a straight line throughout this work?
Thanks, Holger. I think I mentioned it a bit in the slides, and I think I would call it managing the tensions. So there are tensions between challenges, and we don't have the data, and on the other side, we have opportunities. How can we use the data for recycling, for manufacturing? So I think it's important that we kind of play a bit with this both sides of the coin and try to manage them. And the second thing, I think, it's collaboration. in order to solve these tensions, like these kind of problems and challenges, and go for the opportunity, we need to collaboration, not only between companies at the ecosystem level, but also between companies and policymakers, as I said, for example, private-public partnerships, and to see where are the problems, how can we support SMEs, for example, as Kamila and I said, in terms of support centers for the implementation of product passports. And those would be my two takeaways.
Thanks. And now for a closing, one sentence each. In your respective area, what is the most important next step?
I think please contact me. happy to share the service provider opinion with the SMEs or other retailers. So yeah.
Thank you. This is something that we heard a lot for legal clarity. We need to bring ESPR over the line. This will be in April, hopefully, or to be expected. We need the standards that are absolutely vital for this to work, is having the standards as early as possible so everyone can adapt. And then the Commission delegated regulations, so everyone who falls into the scope of ESPR gets the clarity that they need, and this has to be, from a legal perspective, we can only wish for it to be as clear as possible. However, I expect there to be cases in front of the European Court of Justice for interpretation in any case. Yeah, it will be interesting in the future.
So from my perspective, I think it's important that we keep building knowledge. So we need more research projects because there is still no product passport working out there in the field, so we are still in the abstract phase, and so we need to build knowledge and education around it, integrate more universities, schools, so we need people to join the product passport revolution.
Thank you. We're done.